Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about a 1939 film called Disputed Passage, and this stars John Howard, Dorothy Lamour, Akim Tamiroff. It's directed by Frank Borzage. I'm working my way through all of Borzage's films that are available on Blu-ray. I still have a couple more to go. This is a film that was adopted from a novel by Lloyd C Douglas, who was a huge best-selling novelist in this era. Borzage had already made two films from his books, his best-selling novels, but Magnificent Obsession, both John Stahl's version from the 1930s and Douglas Sirk's remake from the 1950s, are probably the adaptations of a Douglas novel that have most successfully stood the test of time. Douglas was he was a medical doctor, and he was also an ordained minister in the Lutheran Church. And all his stories, at least the ones I've seen that have been adopted into movies, my mom actually was a big time reader of Lloyd C Douglas. But while his movies seem to be, their subject matter is about both faith and medicine, science, and the soul. And certainly Disputed Passage would fall into that category as well. Right in the middle of the credits, I don't know that I've ever seen this before. The opening credits are interrupted, and we see a man at a desk writing a letter. We see the letter. He's writing a letter to Paramount Studios, the makers of Disputed Passage, in which he congratulates the studio for sticking to the spirit of his novel. And this is indeed Lloyd C. Douglas, right in the middle of the credits. It's kind of a fun little moment that really, you can sometimes fall asleep through opening credits, but this sort of gives you a little bit of a jolt. The story concerns a young medical student played by John Howard. He's entering medical school. He idolizes a surgeon who is also a professor, and who is one of the most famous and renowned. He wants to study under this man played by Akim Tamiroff in one of his greatest performances. I mean, he's one of the all-time great actors in Hollywood movies, but he really gets a meaty role, and he's in a lot of scenes in this movie, and he's really good. But he's an embittered man. We don't know why exactly. He belittles all the new students, including the sole woman in the cast, but he belittles everybody really. But he does notice a spark in John Howard's character, who stands up to him in this bullying introduction. And as the film moves along, John Howard becomes Akim Tamiroff's assistant. But they have a contentious relationship, but this embittered, crusty, kind of soulless man that Akim Tamiroff has become rubs off on John Howard, so he just lives for his work. Everything is about the work, and he tolerates Akim Tamiroff because he can learn so much from him. But then Dorothy Lamour comes along. Now, Dorothy Lamour is playing a Chinese character, but she is playing it as a Caucasian who was orphaned in China and was brought up as an infant by a Chinese family. So she has an identity. Her main identity that she feels is being a Chinese. Now this was a part that I believe in the book was actually Chinese, but excuse me. But in movies, where the audience couldn't be offended in any such way, so you couldn't have this kind of mixing of the races in a romance. But Anna May Wong, who had been in many silent films and early films, she would have been probably perfect for this role, and maybe with Gary Cooper, maybe it could have been accepted, but I guess not. So John Howard falls in love with her, and now he has this love of his life that's sort of humanizing him, and science isn't everything. Akim Tamiroff has this intense feeling for John Howard, and in Borzage's movies you see a lot of these same-sex friendships that have kind of a more than normal intensity to them. And even though I'm sure nothing is actually meant, but it adds some spice. It certainly does add some spice, especially when we look at these old movies from the perspective of decades and decades. So we have this triangle. We have this triangle of John Howard, we have Dorothy Lamour, we have Akim Tamiroff. Akim Tamiroff tries to come in between these two characters. He tries to, and he's convincing. So now he convinces Dorothy Lamour that she should relinquish her hold on John Howard for the good of his career. And now we have this three-pointed triangle, and the final third of the film is set in China. And this was a difference from Lloyd C Douglas's book, which never left the United States. But China and the Sino-Japanese War was very topical. Pearl Buck had written books. There was a lot of missionaries to China because of all the suffering that was inflicted on the Chinese people during this wartime period. And so they changed, and Borzage didn't like this change. He didn't want to do this, but he was definitely wrong, because boy, does this is so cinematically intense. Sure, it's got the melodramatic devices of Lloyd C Douglas and the conventions of the period, but Borzage really takes this idea of going to China, and now all 3 points of this triangle converge. And in these Lloyd C Douglas movies, and in some of Borzage's other movies, there's always bedside scenes. There's people injured. There's people that need healing, that have to get better. We get this again. We see some horrific scenes of the Japanese bombing of this village where John Howard has come to. He is looking for Dorothy Lamour, who is a prominent member of the Chinese resistance to the Japanese occupation, and the hospital is bombed. And we have injuries, and just magnificent cinema here. And we get a shot of Dorothy Lamour looking through the hole in the roof of the hospital, of this bombed out hospital, and she's looking up at the sky, and she sees the clouds, dark clouds drifting by, and kind of supplication, the cosmic energy, cosmic goodness, the grace of God, perhaps even, which is a Borzage trademark. And you can, if you don't like melodrama, and these kind of melodramatic devices certainly aren't for everybody. If you're uber sophisticated and you like to laugh at melodrama, you might laugh at it, but you have to remember that as far as Borzage as an artist, he believed in all this. He believed in a cosmic good. So his movies can be very kind of transcendent. He transcends the melodrama in much the same way as Douglas Sirk would. Sirk was more critique of society, and Borzage looking for that kind of mystical rung in the ladder that people have to go through to reach a certain point of transcendence. The casting in this movie is kind of odd. These are not A-list stars. Akim Tamiroff was certainly an A-list character actor, but John Howard was in the midst, I think, of his Bulldog Drummond days, and he's very good in Bulldog Drummond. And after this, I think he played George Kittredge in the Philadelphia Story. He was Katharine Hepburn, Tracy Lord's fiancé. But this was this is a huge role for John Howard, and I don't think he's particularly bad, but he doesn't have, the charisma of a full-fledged movie star. And Dorothy Lamour had been in John Ford's The Hurricane. This was her ticket to being an A-list movie star. and you know, she didn't succeed. She ended up being in some very successful Bob Hope, Bing Crosby Road movies, and she did have some good parts all along the way. And she's not particularly, like John Howard, she's not particularly bad. Borzage, one thing Borzage knew was how to get performances out of actors, and so he doesn't have her, she doesn't have much, she doesn't have much emoting to do. She's very quiet, and she's very, I thought she was very effective in these final scenes. And there's a commentary by Nick Pinkerton, and he goes on about in the biographies of many of the, just about everybody that comes along and who has a line or two of dialogue, which takes up more than half of the movie. And some of that's interesting. I kept, you know, waiting, when you're going to get to the movie itself, and he even explains that, well, this is traditional Hollywood filmmaking. It's underlined. There's really nothing that isn't obvious. But then when he does get to Borzage, he does get to some of the themes of the movie, and it's very good. So I'd say the second half of the movie, his commentary is really excellent. So this is Disputed Passage. I still have The Mortal Storm and a couple more Borzage movies to watch, and I'll be making videos. I don't know how many people nowadays are interested in Frank Borzage movies, but I sure am, and I think he's unjustly forgotten. So this is Disputed Passage. It's on Kino Lorber, and I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to see some drama, some significant drama, melodrama. You don't mind melodrama or whatever. So anyways, that's this video. As always, thanks a lot for everybody who stuck around and listened to my babblings. You guys take care, and I will catch you next time.